Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon issuing new threats to Israel, saying no place will be safe if a full-scale war breaks out between the Jewish state and the terrorist group. The warning coming as Israel's defense minister says it will put an end to Hezbollah's constant attacks. While Israel faces the deadly strikes from Hezbollah in the north, it will also be dealing with an insurgency from Hamas. We're going to bring you analysis of what this could mean for Israeli forces. Here in the U.S., a controversy over an historic flag, including one used by George Washington. So how did a Supreme Court justice get involved in this political battle? We're going to take a look. And Louisiana becoming the first state to require the Ten Commandments to be posted in every classroom, from kindergarten to college. We're going to hear what the state's public officials have to say about the new law. All those stories and more ahead today, right now, on CBN News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
Lots to get to on this Thursday. Let's begin in Israel, as the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon is threatening there will be no safe place in the Jewish state if a full-scale war breaks out. And the terrorist group threatens to fight without rules and without a ceiling. Those threats come as Israeli leaders say the Biden administration has confirmed it is not holding up any weapons. CBN's Paul Strand brings us the story. He reports now from Jerusalem.
The Israeli government says it's received assurances from the U.S. that there is no holdup in weapon shipments. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the U.S. is withholding the arms it needs to fight. Wednesday, a post on a social media page for the Prime Minister's office said the U.S. ambassador to Israel told Netanyahu that the weapons are in process of being sent. A spokesman for the Israeli government repeated that message.
Ammunition and weapons that the Prime Minister referred to are in the process of being delivered to Israel.
A delegation of U.S. Congress members met with Netanyahu and Israeli President Herzog yesterday. Herzog says such squabbles shouldn't be allowed to fray the crucial U.S.-Israeli alliance in a critical time.
We are fighting here the battle of the free world against the empire of evil. That's what we're doing, and that's why together we must stay together.
Meanwhile, U.S. efforts to head off an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel aren't bearing fruit. Both Hezbollah and the Israeli Defense Forces are ramping up the rhetoric. Israel's defense minister warns the Jewish nation is going to put an end to near-daily Hezbollah attacks on northern Israel.
We have an obligation to change the situation in the north and return the citizens safely to their homes, and we will find a way to do this.
Hezbollah's leader says the Iranian-backed terrorist group will hold nothing back if Israel attacks.
If the war is imposed on Lebanon, the resistance will fight without control, without rules, and without a ceiling.
He also threatened to drag Cyprus into the war if that island nation lets Israel's military or civilian jets use its runways. Meanwhile, as Hezbollah's shelling of northern Israel increases, citizens still there are tired and afraid.
It's scary because you don't know when it is coming to you. Suddenly you have an alarm. Suddenly missiles fall.
It is unbearable. It can't be contained. It is impossible to live with it.
Many among the roughly 80,000 Israelis displaced by all the shelling have been hoping they could return home by September 1st, when school starts again. But Israel's chief military spokesman says that's not likely. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Israel is wrapping it up in Rafah. The Israeli Defense Forces say they're in the final battles in the war against Hamas in the southern Gaza City, and the fight should be completed within weeks. On this week's episode of The Global Lane, the Jewish News Syndicate's Alex Trayman explains the significance of the IDF's strategic shift, coming as Hamas begins an insurgency in Gaza, and Hezbollah intensifies its attacks in the north.
Every day that the IDF is operating in Rafah, they're justifying the reasons why they needed to go into Rafah. To begin with, they found 25 long tunnels inside Rafah, they're now reporting. But certainly the situation is very dangerous. It's dangerous for a few reasons. Number one, because the IDF has to telegraph exactly where it's going to operate. Once they do that, and they're doing that because of pressure from the Biden administration, then the terrorists know exactly where they're going to be operating, where they're not going to be operating. So the situation is difficult. We lost 11 soldiers in Gaza in the last several days, but the IDF continues to press on, and they believe that they should be wrapping up the operation in Rafah in in the coming weeks.
Can they wrap this up when they still have hostages that they haven't rescued yet?
Yeah, it's a big question about the hostages, and we saw how the IDF was able to rescue 4 hostages just over a week ago, but apparently there's not enough intelligence information to figure out where the rest of the hostages are or how to get them back. But Israel also has to turn its attention towards the north because Hezbollah has been escalating attacks, and the IDF is going to need to divert resources to the northern border with Lebanon to deal with Hezbollah in the coming weeks. And they may have to do that even if there are still hostages remaining inside Gaza.
Well, I want to talk about the north in a moment, but just how accurate do you think this estimate is of completing this job in just a couple of weeks?
Well, what they're trying to do is to dismantle the remaining battalions that are inside Rafah. And what dismantling means, according to the IDF, and I guess according to military doctrine in general, is to kill or incapacitate or neutralize 50% of a battalion. So I think that what they mean is that the major operation inside Rafah will be concluded in the coming weeks. But the prime minister has made it clear that the IDF will be present inside Gaza on some level or moving in and out of Gaza at least until the end of the year, if not much longer, because Hamas has changed strategies and they're operating with guerrilla tactics, and there's no way to take out every last terrorist inside the Gaza Strip in such a short amount of time.
So what are you saying? We're already seeing the beginnings of an insurgency?
I believe so. I mean, you're still seeing the major operation, but no question that the IDF is going to have to continue to operate. There are parts of the Gaza Strip that they have not yet gone into. They're finding more and more entrances into this vast tunnel network, and whenever Hamas terrorists will rear their heads, the IDF will have to use surveillance and use intelligence to go back in and to take care of what they find in more limited scale operations.
Okay, back to the north now, taking on Hezbollah in the north. It's going to be a much more difficult task. Why is that, and is Israel prepared for that?
It's a much more difficult task because the weaponry that Hezbollah has been amassing, the size of their army, and the types of rockets that they have is much greater than any threat that Hamas ever posed. You're talking about long-range rockets and missiles with estimates up to 200,000 rockets and missiles, many of them long range, many of them precision guided, many of them that can carry a much more significant payload than the Qassam rockets that Hamas fires in Gaza. We've seen Hezbollah already fire close to 19,000 rockets, anti-tank guided missiles at Israel since October 7th. Just in the last week, several hundred rockets fired, but we haven't yet seen them use the massive weaponry that they have. And what that means is that if the IDF goes in with a ground operation or escalates from its end the attacks, they're going to have to operate very quickly because Hezbollah has the ability to overrun Israeli missile defense systems if they fire in rapid fire. And quite frankly, they could blanket most of the Israeli home front if they decide to do so.
Well, why hasn't more pressure been put on the UN? They're supposed to have a ceasefire zone there as peacekeeping troops in the area protecting Israel from these type of rocket launches. Why aren't they doing their job? Why isn't more pressure being put on them?
Well, the UN is the organization that censures Israel not as much or more than any country in the world, but more than all countries in the world put together. In 2006, Israel negotiated a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. The organization UNIFIL, a UN agency, was supposed to come in and force a ceasefire agreement, UN Resolution 1701, to make sure that Hezbollah did not remilitarize in the southern sections of Lebanon. It has been an utter disaster, a national mistake for Israel to rely on UN troops. It's only Israel that can ensure its own security, and Israel is now going to pay the price of trusting the UN to keep peace when clearly they have no ability to do so.
Well, a lot of interesting and dangerous days ahead. Alex Trayman, Jewish News Syndicate in Jerusalem. Thank you, Alex, for sharing your time and insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary, for having me.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, ISIS unleashed in the Congo and the BJP party wins fewer votes than expected in India, what it means for Christians, and federal judges place President Biden's new Title IX gender rule on hold. You can see it all on the global lane. It begins this evening on the CBN News Channel at 8 Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBN News app or tune in on YouTube. Coming up, it's known as the Appeal to Heaven flag. It's been around since the Revolutionary War, but now it's at the center of a political debate involving a Supreme Court justice. We're going to take a look at what it's all about. We've got the story for you when we come back.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is dismissing calls to step aside from cases related to the January 6th Capitol Hill riot. The conflict concerns two flags flown at his residences. One of them is a replica of a flag George Washington used to inspire his troops during the Revolutionary War. Tara Mergener has more.
One of the flags in question is the Appeal to Heaven flag. It's been around since the Revolutionary War. However, it's seen a surge in popularity over the past decade, including among Trump supporters. Why it was flown on the justice's property and whether he can rule fairly on these cases is the subject of a growing political fight.
I think what he did was really the wrong thing to do, and it casts some doubt on impartiality.
Despite demands from Democrats in both chambers, Justice Samuel Alito has refused to abstain from cases linked to the 2020 presidential election or the January 6th Capitol riot. At issue, an upside-down American flag, traditionally a sign of distress, displayed outside Alito's Virginia home in 2021, and an Appeal to Heaven flag outside his vacation home last year, both images causing an uproar after being published in the New York Times.
The Appeal to Heaven flag has a more particular history. It was originally associated with John Locke, a philosopher who argued that, like biblical figures, individuals retain the right to appeal to heaven and thus wage revolution.
Also known as the pine tree flag, George Washington used it to inspire his troops.
It became the symbol of these colonists' unwavering spirit of liberty, as well as a clear statement of where they placed their faith.
It's also been part of Christian prayer events without gaining much attention until now.
Is this just a chance indiscretion, or is it a conscious declaration of his MAGA loyalty?
The flag's historical significance is now entangled with contemporary politics.
This was a flag that was very prominent in this movement, particularly the charismatic elements of charismatic Christian elements of Trump support, throughout his presidency and definitely after the presidential election in the lead up to January 6th.
In a letter to Congress by the Supreme Court, Alito maintains his recusal is not warranted, stating the two incidents you cite do not meet the conditions for recusal. As I have stated publicly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with the flying of that flag. Chief Justice John Roberts declined an invitation from Democratic Senators Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse, who serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee, to discuss the court's ethical practices.
If you take away partisanship and the desire of some folks, including members of Congress, to remove people from a court decision if they don't like the way they're likely to vote, this is much ado about nothing. Nothing that has happened with Justice Alito remotely suggests a need to recuse.
Conservative talk show host Eric Erickson criticizes what he sees as a double standard in media coverage.
What's so funny here is that the media organizations that have bought into this story from the left are also the ones giving Judge Merchant in Donald Trump's trial a complete pass for giving money to a fund that was specifically earmarked for, quote, stop Donald Trump and his right-wing legacy.
As questions persist about the political symbolism and impartiality of the highest court in the land, the debate intensifies.
The Appeal to Heaven flag was swapped with an American flag on Saturday.
The historic flag, flown in front of San Francisco City Hall for 60 years, symbolizing America's quest for independence, has been removed a month before Independence Day. While congressional Democrats are slamming Alito's refusal to recuse himself, Donald Trump is praising the conservative justice's move, saying it shows intelligence, courage, and guts. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Still ahead, it's one of the most dreaded words in the world, Alzheimer's, and research shows it can be inherited. But there's also hope. We're going to bring you a look at a program which can help reverse the symptoms of this dreaded disease. We got the story for you right after this. Nearly 7 million Americans live with Alzheimer's, and for some, genetics plays a significant role. New research shows a combination of genes poses a greater threat than previously believed, but there is hope that the symptoms can be reversed. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson has the details.
An estimated 2% of the world's population inherits not one, but two so-called APOE4 genes, one from each parent. Until now, scientists considered this a red flag for developing Alzheimer's, but now see it as more of a certainty.
So that indicates that it is not just a risk factor, but that it's a strong predictor that these individuals would develop Alzheimer's pathology.
The research published in Nature Medicine reports these recipients make up about 1 in 6 Alzheimer's cases.
If you have a strong family history, where a number of relatives have died with early onset Alzheimer's disease, go talk to your doctor.
Unfortunately, Alzheimer's patients inheriting the two genes are often denied leading Alzheimer's drug Leqembi because they're reportedly more vulnerable to the medicine's side effects of potential brain bleeding and swelling. The good news, smarter choices have helped certain patients. Some folks who inherited two APOE4 genes and began experiencing symptoms say they reversed course thanks to epigenetics, behaviors designed to suppress problematic genes.
As you can imagine, I was terrified.
10 years ago, Julie Gregory couldn't remember the way home or recognize familiar faces.
I even contemplated ending my own life. And I think prayer brought me to the point where I realized what I was learning from mainstream medicine just wasn't true.
She says her symptoms reversed after a program of eating a ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, eliminating exposure to toxins like mold, and more, developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen. Julie's story is one of 7 featured in his book, The First Survivors of Alzheimer's.
They gave their specific protocols because they are personalized. Here's what each person did, how they did it, what their workarounds were, etc.
Dr. Bredesen says in addition to a genetic component, his program tests patients for about 40 other Alzheimer's risk factors and addresses each area of concern.
And often there are 10 or more, and then we target those with a precision medicine sort of approach.
It's just plain old common sense, and my experience shows me that it works.
Sally Weinrich also considered suicide 5 years ago when she experienced Alzheimer's symptoms.
I had 2 relatives die from it, really 3 relatives died from it, on both sides of my family.
The book also features her turnaround.
The best thing about my Alzheimer's today is I have answers for it, and I have reversed it. It's wonderful. I love life. I enjoy life.
Over 2,000 people adopted the Bredesen protocol. A clinical trial shows over 80% experience cognitive improvement. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, Louisiana becoming the first state to require the 10 Commandments be posted in every public classroom from kindergarten to college. We'll bring you a look at the new law and what elected officials are saying about it. That story's coming up when we come back. Louisiana has become the first state to require the Ten Commandments be displayed in every public classroom. Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed a bill into law Wednesday requiring poster-sized display of the Ten Commandments in all public classrooms from kindergarten to state-funded universities. Supporters say the measure is not just religious, but has historical significance as well.
If you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses.
The law passed the Republican-controlled legislature, but does face some opposition.
And I pray that Louisiana is the first state to allow moral code to be placed back in the classroom.
We learned the Ten Commandments. We went to Sunday school. And as I said on the Senate floor, if you want your kids to learn the Ten Commandments, you can take them to church.
The American Civil Liberties Union promises to challenge the law, and the case could go to the United States Supreme Court. The commandments displays won't be funded by the state. They'll be paid for, though, by private donations. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I want to leave you with this thought on this Thankful Thursday. You can begin again. There is a rebound from rock bottom. Don't quit, don't die, don't retreat. Rise up and live. There is no failure beyond the redemptive power of God. Trust Him, even when you don't quite trust yourself. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us. That address is right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time. Goodbye and God bless.